Well, hello everyone. I'd like to start off by introducing the team. It's really been a production to present on stress management and anti-anxiety strategies for teens. I am Maria Phelps. I'm a psychologist. The other producers in this production are Haley and Jill, who are social workers in the division. And somebody who's really been an executive producer as a coordinator and is Christy Wake, that has really kind of spearheaded delivering these evidence-based interventions and strategies to families and their children at early, middle, and senior years. COVID has made life more difficult even for us adults, where we suddenly have, even the everyday life things like getting your hair done, getting groceries, has just become more of a challenge. The big life stressor, of course, is COVID. You ask yourself, is my family safe? Am I safe? That just adds to our anxiety and stress. Now, when you think about those kids, the things that they've had to go through, the transition from suspension of in-class learning to, remote and now to blended. There are no more high school dances. Music, sports, drama have all either been curtailed or canceled. Even the sheer joy of hanging out with your friends in the hallway in the school is no longer an option. I used to watch these herds of teenagers walk across the street towards migrate towards the McDonald's. That is no longer an option. 70% of teens report being anxious about getting COVID and the concerns around COVID. And that's collectively all those factors for the adults and the kids are just leaving us stressed. When you're stressed, you can't think straight and you tend to think negatively. And once you start thinking negatively, then you start to have really kind of negative emotions, anxiety, fear, and stress, etc. And what we're going to do is we are going to give you evidence-based strategies and tools that you can use to help your child. And really this presentation, if it were reduced to a soundbite, would be think good, feel good. But first, some announcements. Please use the question and answer function to ask questions at any time during the presentations. These questions cannot be seen by anyone but the presenters. We will answer questions at the end, and if we do not answer your questions during this live presentation, we will follow up with you as soon as possible. As well, St. James-Assiniboia School Division has a Staying Well phone number and email address, which is managed by our clinicians, and you are welcome to contact us and use this resource. It would provide you with information on coping strategies for yourself, for your kid, but also too, we can connect you and provide you with information with, contacting external agencies as well. And this information is going to be posted in the announcement section, and it is actually will be in the PowerPoint as well, and is on the divisional website. There is a feedback form attached to this email that you were sent. We would really appreciate it if you would complete it and email it back to Christy Wake. And the team is going to put her email address in the announcement. And if you're having technical difficulty, and I can tell you, just getting this production on the road, there's been a few technical difficulties, talk about anxiety inducing. If you're having technical difficulty, you cannot see or join the presentation, leave it and then rejoin. This seems to fix the problem. And without further ado, I'm going to talk about anxiety and stress. Now, even before COVID, that we were seeing in every place from Canada, the United States to Britain, there has been an increase in anxiety. And really anxiety, there's various manifestations of it. There's fear, worry, angst, unease, and nervousness. Is just all different words for anxiety, and anxiety is essentially fear. And what this slide here shows you is just that there are just some of the statistics surrounding the increase, where 51% of female students are showing symptoms of anxiety and depression. And to the right-hand side, we see just those, you can just see those arrows going up. The only thing that's gone down, it really is gambling. So there's really posting significant increases in just that sense of psychological internal distress, where the symptoms may not be severe enough to meet the diagnostic criteria for anxiety disorder, but man, it is making life a little less pleasant than it should be for the adolescents in our lives. So why the increase pre-COVID? Well, there's been a number of hypotheses given, and they've all been tested. Definitely social media. There's nothing wrong with social media per se. I mean, really, it's been a lifeline for us during the lockdown and ongoing. But what happens is the trolls come out, and that's the challenge. I worked with a dad whose daughter was a target of online trolls. He called them keyboard warriors because many of them wouldn't have said the same thing they posted online. They would not have said that to his daughter's face. And that just kind of makes kids anxious, impacts self-esteem, and that low mood quickly will ensue as well. Then there's the Kim Kardashian phenomenon with her team of hairdressers and makeup artists and the filtering possibilities and the apps that allow you to enhance that image to make her look even more beautiful than she already is. Kids compare themselves to that and find themselves wanting. There's also been a real increase in perfectionism, and perfectionism really is a form of anxiety. Striving to be your best and is one thing, but striving to be your best and still find yourself come up wanting, which is illustrated in this slide. You can see that perfectionist is actually over 100%. That's still not good enough for the perfectionist. Now, in some sense, the perfectionist kind of trend, which we see kind of, again, definitely in industrialized nation, has increased because these kids are just growing up into a more competitive world, a world we cannot even envision. Where they really have to have that high grade point average in order to get into a college such as Red River, where there is, by the way, a 2-year waiting list for some program, or to get into university, they need that high GPA. And that will enable them to get that good job so they can attain their parents or perhaps surpass their parents' a middle-class lifestyle. So all of those factors collectively have resulted in an increase in anxiety amongst the kids. Now, I've been talking about anxiety as if it's a bad thing, and it's not always a bad thing. It is actually what keeps you alive. An armed intruder, for example, breaks into your house. You hear the sound of breaking glass. A part of the brain called the amygdala, and that is our guard dog that actually keeps us safe. Activates what I call an OMG response, and your body is just flooded with all kinds of hormones, and that preps your body to stand your ground or run away, that fight or flight response. And that enables you to either fight off the armed intruder and survive, or run away, taking your Shih Tzu and your kids and living for another day. So as I mentioned, that guard dog actually keeps us safe. It is a good thing. It has been honed by evolution to do its job. The problem is that sometimes it's just off the leash too much. Now, there are sometimes situations, imagine a icy road where suddenly you have to stop and you just miss the car ahead of you. What happens? That flight or fight response is activated. There's rapid breathing. The blood flow is actually restricted to your vital organs. Your perceptual system is focused ahead. And you know, when you close your eyes and you envision that scenario, it is not the most pleasant feeling. And that's what happens for many of these kids who are dealing with anxiety. It may not be severe enough to meet diagnostic criteria, but is definitely having an impact on their lives. And anxiety and stress is a problem when the flight or fight response is activated and there's really no danger. I've worked with kids who've one of which was walking down a hallway and was just completely upset because she only got a 79 on her first big math test in grade 9. She was just bereft by that. She envisioned all kinds of things. She wasn't going to get into university. It was literally the end of the world. That is not an armed intruder. Giving a presentation to a class, I've had kids make scenes in order to get out of doing that. And that turns out that public speaking is really the number 2 fear amongst kids and adults. For some kids, even going to a birthday party elicits that flight or fight response. That guard dog is off the leash. They think that somebody's going to say something, or no one's going to talk to them, or they themselves are going to criticize it. You know, I thought it was a stupid thing to say. Why would I say that? And for some kids, even asking for help from the teacher about how to do better on a math or test, or how to answer questions. I've worked with kids where I kind of facilitate an introduction to the teacher, and I'm not kidding, their bodies are literally shaking as I'm doing so. The anxiety is a problem when it prevents you from doing something and prevents you from taking those opportunities to ask for help to go to that birthday party. And anxiety is definitely a problem when it begins to happen a lot. And that is because that amygdala hijack is activated. You know, the guard dog is off the leash. And what we're going to do is give you strategies to get the thinking part of the brain to do its job. And as you can see, it's located right behind your eyeballs there. And you can see all its functions. It really is regulates fear, turns the signal off. It actually will issue the stand down order to the guard dog and put a leash on it. It regulates emotions, and it is the part of the brain we want to log on to. And we're going to do that with cognitive behavior therapy. It is a therapeutic approach that's endorsed by the Canadian and American medical, psychological, and psychiatric associations. And no, you don't have to be a trained therapist to implement some of these strategies and tools. And some of them I've worked with kids who call them easy peasy, 1, 2, 3 easy. And some of them you'll say they're just common sense kind of things to do. Well, these are just some of the things that CBT works for. It is the #1 recommended and endorsed type of therapeutic approach for things from anxiety to depression, as well as stress management. And that's what we're going to use these tools and strategies for. And as you can see in this graph, the blue is CBT, the red is medication. In many instances, it's actually as effective, if not even more effective than medication. The first one, if you look at directly your attention to generalized anxiety, these are kids, you know, the worry warts. You know, what if you arrive late picking me up? What if I forget my homework? What if I say something stupid? They just worry. They just really cannot tolerate uncertainty. Again, it may not be severe enough to make, you know, meet diagnostic criteria, but it definitely has an impact on their lives. And frankly, if it has an impact on their lives, it will have an impact on your lives as a parent. Social anxiety, well, so we can all have that type of anxiety where maybe we're a little hesitant to go to a party, for example, or for some kids, just eating in public can be a challenge. And again, you can see that CBT is as effective as medication. So this is the iconic CBT triangle. You can see that thoughts are right at the top. So a kid might have the negative thought, I have a presentation to give and I'm going to say something stupid, and literally die of embarrassment. That gives rise kind of the negative feelings, the fear, the anxiety, the worry, which in turn activates the, you know, the bodily symptoms, the rapid heart rate, the knocking knees, the rapid, you know, the sweaty palms, all of those things, which in turn can sometimes lead to kind of negative behaviors. As I said before, I've had kids who've made scenes that get taken out of the classroom, or kids who call in sick. The problem with that, by kind of avoiding giving that talk, you don't learn to cope with the feelings of anxiety, because, you know, who knows, you might have rocked their presentation. You may indeed have said something that maybe people laugh, but everyone can trip and stumble over their words when they're speaking publicly. And the real big problem is it just reinforces the anxiety. It just keeps it alive. It just feeds that anxiety monster. And we refer to that as the anxiety cycle. You perceive something, that presentation. Nobody has ever, the cause of death has ever been listed as, death by embarrassment. And if you avoid what's making you afraid, there's a brief relief, but it just keeps that anxiety cycle going and feeds that anxiety monster. Then in essence, we have to help these kids begin to face their fears, to give them the skills and the tools they need to face their fears, and really turn them into anxiety warriors and to be able to fight back against that anxiety. Well, this is all these strategies, pre-COVID, during COVID, or post-COVID, they will work. But definitely COVID has definitely resulted in an even more increase in anxiety amongst their kids, where 70% of kids are reporting feeling anxious or very anxious about COVID. To the right is just those who are just reporting an increase, impact index, just showing an increase of those who are mentally struggling with just the impact of a pandemic. Now, right there, tips for positive mental health, and really think good, feel good. This is all kind of embedded in that positive psychology. You can see all kinds of strategies, and right at the top is positive thinking, and we're going to give you the tools for that. We're also going to talk about the benefits of exercise and socialization online, as well as all kinds of things, all kinds of strategies going forward. Well, COVID is definitely shown, illustrated to the adults and then the kids, that life can change very quickly. I have a ritual, really more of a tradition, where the kind of October long weekend, the Friday of, we have an adult Thanksgiving, and nobody has to cut up anybody else's meat. And usually there's a big crowd, about 16 people were coming, and Snowmageddon hit. I remember that big storm. I thought, oh man, it's going to be a terrible winter. And we had turkey for days. The only thing I couldn't find a recipe for turkey as a dessert. Shortly thereafter, a member of the extended family passed away suddenly, and that was February, and a month later, COVID hit. So that shows you just how uncertain and unpredictable life can be, that you can have something bad happen unexpectedly. Now, some of us, including me, would worry as a way to kind of control what was going on. And unfortunately, that does not work. It doesn't slow the progress of the virus, and it does prevent you from enjoying the good things in life. And the first strategy that's a healthier way to cope with uncertainty begins with adjusting our thinking, because what we think drives our emotions. And we're going to target those negative thinking patterns, because if you realize just how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought again. So given that I've worked with a lot of kids during my rather lengthy career, which is still ongoing, is I find, and frankly, even when I've worked with adults, we don't have enough tools in our toolkit. We need a whole bunch of tools. And what are these tools? They're just methods we use to deal with stressful situations in order to minimize or tolerate stress. Pre-COVID, a stressful event, let's say it's a looming deadline or paying a bill. Once that stressor was gone, we were good to go. But now with COVID, we got stress all the time. And so we got to have coping strategies that at least help us deal more healthy, in a more healthy way, to deal with that kind of stress, just the stress from trying to go grocery shopping or getting my hair done, to the real big one, tracking the change in numbers, for example. Pre-COVID, I used to work with, and I still do, but in a pre-COVID setting, working with kids who may be struggling academically and socially. They would engage what I would call maladaptive coping. They'd come home from school, they go up to their bedroom before they enter the bedroom. Shortly thereafter, they'd slam that door shut, and then they would just every waking moment on social media, not doing their homework. And by doing that, that kind of has that negative cycle we've been talking about, that because the next day, those outstanding assignments were still there as well. For some kids, they started to engage in drugs. By running away and not facing the difficulties, it just keeps the difficulties going. But facing your fears, you really have to have an attitude of bravery, which we're going to strongly help you to encourage and give you the tools to help your kids going forward. So here's the tools. Here we even have a little toolbox here. The first tool is to challenge your stinking thinking. That's what I call it. It's just really that's negative thinking. And the second tool is cognitive reframing. That's just looking at an event or an experience and actually seeing the positive. We always tend to focus on the negative, and we need to kind of readjust our thinking and see that even in amongst a pandemic, hello, it was +2 today. The third tool is positive self-talk. What has always been heartbreaking for me in working with kids who seem to have it all, and yet they are so harsh, they are so negative when they talk about themselves. They will say things like, I'm stupid, I'm a loser. We're going to give them strategies, help you give them strategies to change that negative self-talk to more positive self-talk, because thinking positively is actually quite good for your brain. We're going to make uncertainty their friend, and frankly our friend as well, by providing a whole bunch of strategies, including the most important one, focus on what you can control, and importantly, focus on the good things in life. And on-the-go tools. We all need tools that we can implement in a heartbeat. Sometimes the anxiety is such you need to distract yourself, and you cannot say when you're about to write an exam, excuse me, I just got to do some yoga. We're going to give just a little simple strategy that can be implemented in seconds. Now, there has been a real revolution in the last 30 years in psychology. You know, we've always kind of really studied the negatives, such as depression. But there's been a real change where we're also now studying things like happiness. And it turns out that the skills of happiness are things that actually can enhance happiness. These are all skills that can actually be taught. And that is positive psychology, the science of well-being. So these are all evidence-based strategies. And really, it is really quite interesting because these strategies do work and you can learn to be happy. Now we're going to talk about just some general strategies when you're working, trying to support someone who's feeling anxious or stressed. There are definitely do's and don'ts. We're going to talk about a do strategy, which is validate and push. I always call it validate and nudge, and this is helping your teen face with fear in a more supportive way. There are don'ts. One is excessive reassurance, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And the one that I always struggle with, because I have sometimes not the most patient person, and I know that those who work with me are aghast right now with that. But it's sometimes really hard not to step in and take over, and that is a don't, because then they never learn that they themselves can cope or have the strategies that they need to implement because you're there to help them. So validation, it doesn't mean you agree. Here's an example. My math teacher doesn't like me. Parent, you are really feeling certain that she hates you. You want to also connect with past experience. Since you had a panic attack on the bus, you are scared to ride one now. And to normalize, to kind of validate what they're feeling. It seems very normal to be nervous before a test. That sure makes sense to me. It's just some examples. You want to use the word and not use the word but. I understand you're really anxious right now, and I'm going to help you deal with your anxiety. I'm going to give you some strategies going forward. So you want to validate and push. Too much validation where you're just saying, I understand you're really frustrated, really doesn't inspire change. And too much direction, you know, they shut down. And the goal is to really balance the two. Just kind of some general rules of thumb. So stinking thinking. That's the tool one. We're actually going to challenge that. And there are some common negative thinking patterns. They're common because we all engage at them. Even a trained psychologist and social worker, we all fall into that negative thinking pattern. So one, especially anxious kids, think they're negative thinkers. They catastrophize a lot. So the kid that I was talking about getting a 79, it was the end of her career. She couldn't envision the fact that it really wasn't one. Nobody really focuses on that one, a 79 for Pete's sake. And she had the second highest mark in that particular math class. No, you're still going to be able to get into university. Minimizing, I see that quite a bit, where a kid, got like a 80 in a pre-calc, anyone can have it. Well, not really. Jumping to conclusion, a friend doesn't say hi to them in the hallway. Well, now that's because the friend hates them. But maybe, just maybe, it was because the friend didn't see them. Or personalization. I'm pretty sure that teacher hates me just by the way they said their name. Well, again, maybe they were thinking about something else, and that's how the reason why they said your name, kind of offhanded kind of way. And this is the one, as I mentioned earlier, that always breaks my heart. Work with kids sometimes who seem to have it all. And yet, I got that question wrong. I'm so stupid. Why am I such a loser? And that is really, truly heartbreaking. And we're going to talk about ways to kind of target that and change it into a more positive direction. That all or nothing thinking, everything has to be perfect or else it's a failure. And, that again, with that example of getting a 79, it really wasn't a failure. Second highest mark. And reach out to the teacher, and I bet you will give you tips about how to study smarter, not harder, going forward. So how do we do that? How do we challenge those thinking errors? One, we have to encourage a more a balanced way of thinking. We often will refer to that as a detective thinking, or adopting a view as if you're a scientist. What is the evidence for that? Well, there's very little evidence that if you get a grade 9, 79 in math, that your university career is not going to happen. So you kind of want to look for the actual evidence, encourage them. What would you say to a friend? And this is a big one. Kids will talk so negatively, so harshly to themselves, but they wouldn't talk that way to a friend. We have to encourage them to start talking to themselves as if they're talking to a friend, to have a little more kindness and compassion towards themselves. And focusing only on the negative. When you're depressed and anxious and stressed out, and we all do that, and we have a negativity bias, we just focus on the negative and we ignore the positives. And unfortunately, again, there becomes this kind of self-reinforcing cycle where if you only focus on the negative, that's all you're going to see. And we're going to talk about ways to get kids, and frankly us, to start focusing a little bit on the awesome things that are actually happening going forward. We're going to talk about cognitive reframing, and that's kind of just restructuring, reframing a thing. So it's just seeing the positives, or maybe a little closer to the truth. I'd like to get into this top-notch university, but if I don't, you know what? I'll get into another university. It's not the end of the world. We want to name that thinking error. So for example, I know this is all or none thinking. It isn't based in reality, because I can still get into a good university when I get a 79 in grade 9 math. We are actually gives me an opportunity. This presentation going forward is going to be available either online or, through various formats. So you can definitely, use it and review it at any time. So just a little cartoon here. You can see that brain just focusing on the bad, and look at all the good. We got to get kids and ourselves to start focusing on the awesome things that are happening. So one of these are just these kind of thought challengers. Is it really true, for example, that you're not going to get into university with a 79 grade math? who cares? I didn't say that to her though. Is can you expect to be perfect in everything you do? Because that is the way to deal with the perfectionism in our life. Slash the guitars with Guns N' Roses played every day, practice every day for 18 hours. His parents must have been saint. You can't be perfect in the first time you try it. You have to work towards it. Perfection is sometimes a learned skill. But for some kids, even when they practice, it's still not good enough. And we need to target that as well. And are we forgetting the good things? And are you being fair to yourself? We have to encourage ourselves and our kids to start being kinder to themselves. Now, what we know is that when we are kind of stressed, what really helps is a mnemonic. That's a memory device associated with a visual. And that's this. The 3 C's: catch, check, and change. So catch that thought became before the emotion. I'm going to say something stupid and I'm going to die of embarrassment, anxiety, and fear quickly follow. Check it. How accurate is it? Well, no one's died of embarrassment. How useful is it? Is it going to help me with my presentation? No. An important thing is, maybe I will trip and stumble, as I just illustrated there. But maybe no one's listening. Or you know what, if I do, I've learned that I can cope when I do so. So change the thought to something more accurate, helpful when is needed. So that catch, check, and change. And actually some of the high schools I work at, we actually have that up. It's just a little a reminder that can be deployed when you are feeling that negative kind of thinking. So we need to encourage a more balanced way of thinking. And sometimes, in our heads, we've got that prosecuting attorney, and it is too loud and it is negative, and we got to get that defense attorney to start speaking up and start defending us. So the second tool is a cognitive reframing. You can see in that frame, she's gone from real negative to real positive. And what that is just a way of viewing and experiencing events, ideas, and concepts and emotions to find more positive alternatives, to go from I can't do anything right to replacing that, reframing it to I can do something right. I can get better at this by practicing my presentation. I can do this. And importantly, I can feel anxious and still do this. Unhelpful and unrealistic thought. I always screw things up. I'm such a loser. What's wrong with me? I wish I could say that that is an isolated example, but I have worked with kids who've said those exact same words. Well, everyone makes mistakes, including me. I'm only human. I can remember a meeting that I attended in which there was a member from an external agency, an attendee, and I've met her on a couple of occasions. Anyway, she sat down and I said, "Are you pregnant?" I was met with stony silence and ice cold glare because she wasn't pregnant. All I can do now is try to best to fix that situation and learn from that experience. Question I have never asked again going forward. Kids who'll say, I can't do it, I feel way too anxious. Why can't I control my anxious? Well, it's okay and normal to feel anxious. We all do at some time. We're going to give you strategies to deal with that. And you know what? It's normal and a-okay to feel anxious during a pandemic. Anxiety won't kill you, and we're going to give them strategies where they can feel anxious, and you know what? They can still go to that party, including when that party is online, and hopefully someday we'll be able to have people in our homes, because I'm a hugger. When somebody comes into my home, I always hug them, and I'm really kind of missing that. I'm also missing going to weddings, by the way. So we got to get kids to focus on what went right, not on what went wrong. For example, that kid who got that 79, getting her to focus on just the first time you wrote a grade 9 exam, which is very different from writing an exam in grade 8. And you got the second highest mark. By getting them to focus on the positives, then they're encouraged to try again. Worked with a classroom teacher who had a particularly challenging student. At the end of the day, She was thinking of leaving the profession. So we got her to, I worked with her and I asked her to focus on what she did during a day, the things she did right. You know, she taught kids to read, write, and do arithmetic that day, which is not a small achievement. And in the hallway, she was talking to a student, and this was pre-COVID, by the way, talking to a student, and she said something funny. He laughed, and then he said something funny, and she laughed, and she leaned over and touched him on the shoulder. And again, as I said, pre-COVID, and then she started to walk away. He turned around, started to walk away. But you know what? He stopped and turned around as she retreated down the hallway, and he looked at her. And I know that that 14-year-old at the age of 40 is going to remember that student, remember that teacher for the rest of his life. So we got to recognize when we're thinking negatively. We got to identify that negative thought. Are we ignoring? Are we minimizing? Are we exaggerating the import of having a 79, for example? Is that a really kind of accurate? We need to challenge it. No, it's not. We can, you know, reframe it and see that you got the second highest mark in that classroom. And so by reframing and focusing on the positive, it's not so negative and it's not so permanent and it's definitely not so pervasive. Because it turns out positive thinking is actually really, really good for your brain. And we're going to talk about positive thinking, but also to positive self-talk. Because it turns out you can literally rewire your brain to be happy by simply recalling 3 things you are grateful for every day for 21 days in a row. It really requires practice, definitely, to rewire the brain. So don't just try the strategies once, do them more than once. Thinking differently requires practice, and you have to kind of, you know, it always amazes me. I get kids to do journals, and journaling is a classic CBT technique. They will write me an essay on the negatives in their life. When I ask them to list 3 positive things or talk about what they're grateful, I always have to kickstart that process. We seem to just have this natural predisposition to focus on the negative, and we need to retrain our brains to start focusing on the positives. So that positive self-talk, I can't do this, should become I can do this. I often get kids to list their strengths. No problem getting them to list their weaknesses, and actually this is also too a challenge for adults. I ask them to list their strengths. I frequently get, I don't know. Then I rephrase it and I say, well, what would your parents say? What would your friends say? And even then, sometimes I have to provide a concrete example. It's just a more difficult process. We gotta, you know, you collaborate, problem solve with them about getting them to list their strengths. You may have to kickstart it. We gotta encourage an attitude of bravery, because when that guard dog is off the leash, and they face their fears and they cope with that situation, we got to reward that bravery. We got to arm them, become anxiety warriors, but also to complement and reinforce that. I often will say to the men I live with, I'll say something when they don't put the dishes in the dishwasher, my pet peeve. But when they do, I will often not say anything, and we need to remind ourselves that we need to reinforce, reward, and thank them for doing something, even as I'm eye-rolling internally. So here are just some concrete examples. You know, I can get through this, a more positive self-talk. I believe in myself and my abilities. I am enough, because one of the things we know by brainwave and brain scans, that there's a neurotransmitter called serotonin. When it is low, you are depressed, you're feeling low, you're feeling sad. When you start thinking positively, when you start engaging in positive self-talk, that increases. There is a hormone called I often will mispronounce it as oxytocin, and that's actually the correct way. Sometimes I will say oxytocin, and that's the opiate. We don't want that one. Oxytocin, you know, that's called the love hormone. When I look at a loved one that is actually released, it makes us feel good. When the loved one looks at me, that too is released in them as well as me. When your dog looks at you, studies have shown that oxytocin is released. You know, I don't know about cats, but it turns out that that is all really good. Soon as you start thinking negatively, the oxytocin drops, the serotonin drops. So that's why thinking good is good for your brain. As a matter of fact, during a crisis, when community rallies around, such as in a pandemic, oxytocin is released. When you help somebody, when your teen perhaps shovels the driveway of a next door neighbor who is elderly, that will release oxytocin in them and they feel better. When you're as an adult, stop and pick up groceries for your next door neighbor, oxytocin is released. It really is a feel-good drug. Well, uncertainty, and some of the examples I've given definitely have shown that life can throw you curveballs, and sometimes more than one curveball at a time. There is this myth that life is zero risk. You can definitely have this perception, well, I'm going to have a zero risk by no longer driving and parking my car and not getting in a car accident. A couple in New Jersey, second-story apartment, sound asleep in their bedrooms. A stolen Porsche careened out of control off the overpass and went right into that second-story bedroom, killing them both. So life can throw just the most random, unpredictable things. So life is more about risk management than the exclusion of risk. So we need to focus on things that we can control and not focus on things that we can't control. Worrying is not going to help in any way kind of fast track the end of the pandemic or how the virus evolves or the accuracy of the statistics. But what is under our control is to have a helpful response to uncertainty, which is focusing on the things you can control, such as washing your hands, social distancing, being kind to yourself, doing an act of kindness for somebody else, just even saying something nice, making a conscious effort to compliment somebody on a daily basis. And another one is limit news consumption. I used to, I was becoming one of the leading experts on COVID. Now at the end of the day, I check, and I really just check the positivity rate. Can I get my hair done? It just really, we know that if you ruminate, if you focus on it, it just has a negative impact. There becomes that negative cycle. And if you have that same old thinking, just the same old results going forward, it becomes that negative cycle. So focus on the things you can control. Wear the mask and social distancing. Enjoy those social relationships, but do it safely. We have to challenge that need for certainty because life is not certain. All kinds of random things can happen, and focus on the things that we do have. Family was not canceled during the lockdown. Singing, laughing, hope, Netflix and skip the dishes, music and getting outdoors. These are all things that we've come to enjoy. And I want to talk about, sometimes we think that, if life is unpredictable, bad happens, but sometimes life is unpredictable and good happens. A friend of mine went through a divorce. Shortly thereafter, she went on, online dating. And I can tell you, there was a real mismatch between the profiles and the realities of the suitors. Anyway, she had two strapping teenagers who literally, I swear to God, that would grow 6 inches overnight. And the amount of milk she had to buy on a weekly basis was incredible. I told her, just buy a cow, it would be cheaper. Anyway, she's at Costco. She reaches for a pair of pants and there's a tug and there's a guy on the other end who's also reaching for the same pair of pants. She says something funny, he laughs. He in turn says something funny and she laughs. And ladies and gentlemen, she found love at Costco. So sometimes even amongst this unpredictable, good things happen, and she is happily married. And there are 6, big strapping teenagers now, all kind of buying milk, now having to have a van to get the milk. So one of the things we know, thinking differently, learning to do something, even like reading or driving a car. I can remember when I first started to drive, man, I was conscious of everything. Now I can drive home and, I don't even know how I got home. But meanwhile, I kind of worked on the grocery list or what I was going to do my next day. We want it to become automatic, to think positive. And the only way to do that is to practice, practice, practice. So make a commitment to practicing a particular strategy or tool that resonates with you, that you enjoy doing, and just commit to doing it on more than one occasion. We're going to give you all kinds of dial down ways to your anxiety and your stress, and it is on the go. It helps you think more clearly and focus. You can do them anywhere, and the tools are private. For teens, that's a real big consideration, and frankly, even for adults, that others won't even know you're using them. And importantly, you can deploy them in seconds. We're going to have that positive thinking. This just illustrates that positive cycle where you're looking forward to going to a party. You start feeling excited and happy and you go to that party. The negative cycle is self-reinforcing, but so too is that positive cycle. Here is just some things about coping, everything from relaxation to aerobic exercise. But right there is that positive thinking. Anxiety is normal during COVID, but you can kind of retrain your brain to think more positively, to find the joy in life. And some things as simple as a beautiful day with the sun up. And if you're a true Winnipegger, when it's minus 25 and the sun's out and there's no wind, you're walking around with your coat open. Now, some of the really simple, easy peasy 1, 2, 3 tools, a kid said that to me, it took me weeks to get that out of my head, is to kind of think of something else, to use visualization techniques, such as this, visualize a happy place. By the way, this is not, Winnipeg in February, but doesn't that look just awesome? That nice sandy beach and the palm trees in the background. Visualize a happy puppy, whatever you need to do to kind of distract your brain for that brief moment so you can get on with your life in whatever situation you find yourself. I mean, that puppy is literally smiling. One of the big things is a confidence builder. This is just involves visualizing things. We often will visualize the worst case scenario. This is actually a strategy deployed by, sports psychologists when they're working with athletes, for example, but we can use it too. So they can mentally rehearse a scary situation, but what's critical is visualizing that positive, visualizing that success, whether it's a presentation or whether it's writing that big exam and nailing it, or even going to that party going forward. Another on-the-go tool is deep breathing. Again, they can use it in class without noticing. They can be sitting at the couch and using it. They can be using it just in that moments when that exam starts. Whenever I think of some of the exam time, already I start kind of hyperventilating. All right, this is something they can deploy because you can't do yoga, you can't go into another room and meditate, but you can use this so briefly. So what you do is you breathe in and out to a count of 8, and you have them imagine a balloon filling with air and then totally emptying. A strategy that I use, and here again, the verbal paired with the visual, is to kind of breathe in the soup and blow out the candles. You just do that for a couple of times. It just kind of really helps me to go on with my life. Another one is kind of tensing your muscles and then relaxing them. So you start at your feet and you work up from your shins to your thighs all the way up to the top of your head. You notice that it's called De-Stress Monday. Remember when start of the work week was the most stressful thing in our lives. So you can use this at any time, and definitely you can use it on Monday. Music. 81% of people said that music really helped them during the COVID pandemic. Whatever song that, or a playlist, I have a few, that kind of helps you definitely engage it. Kids, for a lot of kids, this is their go-to tool, on-the-go tool whenever they're feeling anxious or stressed. Exercise, I cannot tell you, we all know endorphins increase, it's kind of like body opiates. What also increases is dopamine, and dopamine helps your body, helps your brain think more clearly. And one of the things we know that exercise improves your sleep. And sometimes when you're stressed out, it's hard to get a good night's sleep and you can't think clearly. And there's nothing more restorative than a good night's sleep or a nap. And it turns out with that when you're sleeping, that kind of enables the receptors, which kind of suck up the serotonin and the oxytocin to do their job. It's when they repair themselves. And so definitely exercise and a good night's sleep is critical. Another thing I have to mention, there's a lot of research about nature. Getting out there and increases serotonin, increases dopamine and oxytocin by getting out there, going for a walk. Nice, doesn't have to be, a full-scale marathon, but definitely just going outside, enjoying nature. Well, there are additional tools: meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, and mindfulness. Some of these tools, I'll be honest, it requires a little bit of practice where you do have to become more skilled at mindfulness going forward. But what we know about meditation, for example, again, brain scans, all kinds of research showing the benefits. What it does is that thinking part of the brain, it really benefits that thinking part of the brain. It gets it to do its job. And as we know, that thinking part of the brain puts a leash on that old guard dog so you can think more clearly and make better decisions. And it changes the brain structure. The behavior is not changed unless you change the brain. And you change the brain by changing the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you behave. And in just 8 weeks of meditation regime, you have a positive impact on learning and memory and sense of self. So we've come to the discussion portion. We're going to open this up a little bit. These are questions that we actually asked real live teenagers at one of the high schools I'm at. We asked them what was the most stressful part of the pandemic for you. Well, there was quite a bit, and it was eerily similar to what the adults were saying, the lockdown, not seeing any cars in the street, just the stresses and strains of, going grocery shopping, or what would happen if you had a toothache, or, you couldn't get your teeth, just the kind of the social isolation, just the real stressful parts for you. But what we would like you to focus on and provide us with what were some of the good things that have come from that. We're going to give you a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to show you what the kids said, what actual real life teenagers said, what were some of the good things that came during the pandemic, that came during the lockdown. Okay, we've got some awesome that's just perfect because, it kind of maps onto what the kids were saying. That this was family, we all kind of pre-COVID were racing around, dropping kids off, doing this, doing that, kind of leading separate lives. And family was a big one for the kids, kind of a rediscovery of family, a re-enjoyment, during the lockdown where they got to spend time with the family. Sure, sometimes it was forced. But that really became a recurring theme amongst the kids. And again, there was the kind of a reconsideration of the priorities is one of the things that came out as well, where you couldn't spend time with your kids, with your peers hanging out, but now you were spending time with your family. Another big one that came out was music, but also reading more. Was the one that was listed. Baking was like number 2 and number 3. It was a real kind of family activity, a real kind of engaging activity. And I'll tell you, sometimes that baking became cooking. They kind of discovered the joy of cooking for others, where they were planning the meal and sharing that with their family and loved ones going forward. Another one was game night, just spending time with their family. Sometimes it was a kind of a rediscovery of their siblings too as well. You know, they also listed music, reading, singing, laughing, and getting outdoors. You know, the negatives were the same as the adults, and it turns out that the positives were the same as the adults. So it's just a way of getting them to focus that even amidst a pandemic and a significant change in life, that good things can come from it. And when there have been surveys about people that changing their priorities and adopting a work-life balance, hopefully that even post-COVID, that'll continue on because that's something that definitely, even in my own life, is something where now we do have a sit-down dinner. We do make time to, even if it's sitting with a TV tray, with our food, watching Netflix, with our ordered in pizza, skip the dishes pizza. There is that connection, enjoying each other's company. So again, think good, feel good. And it turns out that there is an app for that. This helps kids, but frankly, you can upload it. Actually, Calm is free. And all of these strategies are kind of CBT based, and they're just all kinds of little strategies that you can deploy in a moment's time. There is also the staying well. Again, there's the email, but to the right is the phone number. It'll actually make the call. It'll actually direct you to the line, and there will be, you know, as you always, you know, there's a 1-800 number, and then you can access all kinds of support. Again, it is available to the parents. It is available to caregivers, staff, and of course our students again. And we try to get to you in a timely manner, whether that's providing you with some additional strategies, additional information or resources, or helping you to connect through the labyrinth of various government agencies and supports going forward. The best website on the planet, CBT based, is Anxiety Canada. It will have resources for you, resources for teens, especially sometimes they will actually navigate these resources. There's a lot of research that this kind of telehealth approach, it can be as beneficial as going to see a therapist. And definitely in a time of COVID, accessing a therapist is definitely a more delayed and laborious process. Also on this site, they have a psychologist available. So if you text them a question using that site, they too will get back to you in a timely manner as well. Well, resources in the school level. Every school has a guidance counselor that is available to support you and your kids. And in the schools are psychologists and social workers. Again, they are available to support students and their families. There is a little bit of more of a process. We consult without a referral. If you want direct support, then it becomes a process. But again, that's something the school team can assist you with in order to access that kind of more one-on-one support with a psychologist or a social worker. Family doctor is another resource. There are resources for that deploy cognitive-based therapy and have psychologists, a stable of them, at the Health Science Center, and also to access Winnipeg West. There's a mental health team available. I'll be honest with you, as is everything, COVID has slowed things down. And so it definitely will take you a little more time to access some of these resources. There's also the Anxiety Disorders Association of Manitoba. There is private practices available. You know, sometimes some kids just need more support. They do need that therapeutic support, either through the Health Science Center, Access West, or going private. So those are two, the Cognitive Behavior Therapy Institute of Manitoba and a Clinic Psychology Manitoba. Usually when you go private, the wait lists are less, but even then, last time I checked, there were still 3 to 4 weeks. There are counseling services with a sliding fee scale. So depending on your income, it may be a minimal payment at best. Anxiety Canada, these are all these websites available. Again, you can click on it and all kinds of resources are available, and all kinds of resources to how to deal and support your kids and frankly ourselves, whether we're just dealing with having difficulty dealing with everyday life stressors or the anxiety associated with COVID. Here are some additional resources. I believe one of them, Christy Wake, may have dropped off to you, such as helping your anxious child. We sent you all kinds of resources going forward. And there's some excellent workbooks and there's some excellent websites. Anyway, I would just like to thank you for attending and being a part of this community-based response to COVID. We are now at the portion where we're answering questions. Okay. Okay, the first question that's coming out, one of the things, because we just kind of want to have general strategies, one of the things, if we have a kid who's afraid of water, and for example, well, you can't throw them in the water, they'll never get in the water. One of the fundamental components of cognitive behavior therapy is kind of an exposure to the feared object, event, or stimulus. You can't throw a kid in the water. But what you can do is adopt a stepladder approach, and that's just a successive, closer, progressive approximation to getting you all the way into the water. So there again, you go to Anxiety BC, they will have examples of step ladders and all kinds of things. So we get them to go into the water up to the knees, and then go into the water up to their thighs, and then progressively kind of put their head in the water and then start to swim. And yes, you can definitely motivate your child. We're going to talk about rewards. Our external reinforcer is a paycheck, and I love my job. Don't know if I would go as often if I wasn't being paid. If you're going to have a kid face their anxiety, man, you got to reward them. Do you buy them a car? No, but it could be something as simple as get to pick the dessert. Or you have a surprise bag where maybe if they're like art supplies, they stick their hand into it and they pull out something. There's all kinds of strategies available at Anxiety Canada, but also too in many of those books that we provided you. Yes, I can go back to the slide with websites. So again, that anxiety, I forgot to adjust it. It used to be called Anxiety BC, but it now is Anxiety Canada. It is just a really awesome, and actually it is often the first site I go to if I want to provide resources to families, and it has resources for little guys and girls, helping parents, if you have a kid in early years. It has resources that are appropriate for kids in middle years, and it has resources for adolescents or kids in university. And frankly, those resources, those approaches, those CBT approaches work for you at any age. If a kid is even at the age of 4, they can identify emotions. So even at the very young age, CBT can be used. We might use a more behavioral approach, but kind of the encouraging more positive thinking and encouraging that attitude of bravery to face their fears, to fight their fears, is available, all those strategies going forward. Oh, okay. Right now, remotely, it looks like there's a bank of, if you ever PBS where they have the volunteers manning the phone. We have volunteers manning the answering thing. So they're typing in furiously and answering your questions going forward. And if you have a personal question, please, we will respect that, and we will get back to you on kind of a one-on-one setting. Might be sometime tomorrow or the day after, but someone will definitely get back to you, and there is no question that we will not answer. Well, thank you very much to all those people in, remote land. It's been really, I'm just, my body's just flooded with oxytocin right now. And I think there's, the feedback at early and middle years has been such that we definitely hear you. We're definitely going to be doing it again. And we're thinking perhaps, I don't want to speak for the committee. Sometimes I do, and then I get in trouble. But we were thinking more of a resiliency base, something that's going to be for early, middle, and senior years kids, and frankly for all of us, because let's not forget COVID. And we're almost coming up to the 1-year anniversary. But again, there's things we can do and to focus on the positive. Anyway, thank you and good night.